Ever felt like you're always the one giving but never receiving? This story will make you rethink everything. Every morning when the first rays of sunlight crept through my window, I was already awake, sitting at my desk, going over plans, projects, and upcoming meetings. At 30 years old, I was proud of what I had built, my career, my independence. I was the kind of woman who got up early, worked late, and never shied away from a challenge. But despite my professional success, there was always one thing in my life that never seemed to go quite right: my family. My name is Samantha. I'm the CEO of a small digital marketing firm, and I love my job. It took years of hard work, sleepless nights, and countless sacrifices to get where I am, but I've made it. My life is my own. But when it comes to my family, I sometimes feel like I've been playing a role I didn't sign up for. I've always been the responsible one, the one who takes care of everything. But it's never been enough. Not when it comes to my younger sister, Jessica. Jessica and I couldn't be more different. I've always had to work for everything, to fight for every opportunity, while she seems to glide through life with no effort at all. She doesn't have a stable job, doesn't have a clear direction in life, and yet somehow everything seems to fall into place for her. Maybe it's the way our mother coddles her, always thinking she needs extra care and attention. I've never understood it. No matter how hard I work, no matter how much I accomplish, it's never enough. Jessica is the one who always gets the special treatment, the one who gets all the attention. It's not that I don't love her.
Ido, deeply.
But there are times when it feels like I'm invisible. The way my mother dotes on Jessica, always worried about her, always putting her first, it's exhausting. I feel like I'm the one who carries the weight of the world on my shoulders, while Jessica glides along, barely lifting a finger. It's hard not to feel like I've been overlooked. But I've learned to deal with it, or at least pretend to. Despite this, family is still everything to me. They're the reason I work so hard, the reason I push myself to the limit. And that's why, after months of saving every penny I could, I decided to give them something special, a trip. Not just any trip, but a luxurious European getaway. A trip that would take us to Paris, Rome, and Barcelona, where we could indulge in 5-star hotels, gourmet meals, and private tours. I had planned every detail, every flight, every hotel, every meal, and every activity. It was going to be perfect. I wanted to give my mom and Jessica the kind of vacation they deserved, even if it meant sacrificing my own time and energy. I had worked tirelessly, sacrificing weekends and evenings to make sure everything was just right. I wanted this trip to be something they'd remember forever, something they could look back on and know how much I cared. This was my gift to them. The morning of the trip arrived, and I was practically buzzing with excitement. After months of anticipation, everything was finally coming together. I had arranged for the car to pick us up early, so we could get to the airport on time. As I pulled into my mom's driveway, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. I was proud of myself. I had made this happen. I had worked so hard for this moment. When I saw my mom standing at the door with her suitcase, I felt a rush of warmth. She was always so supportive, always encouraging me to do my best. I was about to do something special for her. But then I saw Jessica. She was walking out of the house, pulling her own suitcase behind her. I froze for a moment, confused. Why was she coming along? This was supposed to be a special trip for the three of us, something I had planned for months. It was meant to be our time to relax, to bond as a family. But now here she was with that familiar carefree smile on her face. I turned to my mom, my heart sinking. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me, and there was an almost unnatural cheerfulness in her expression. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, as if nothing was wrong. "We decided that Jessica should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately, and she really needs this trip." I felt the ground shift beneath me. I had been planning this for months. I had worked hard, sacrificed everything to make this trip perfect. But now it wasn't my trip anymore. It was Jessica's. My chest tightened and I couldn't find the words to respond. "Instead of me?" I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. "But I've been planning this for months. I paid for everything." My mom waved a hand dismissively, as if I were making too big a deal out of nothing. "We're grateful, sweetheart. But you're always working so hard. You'll have another chance to take a trip. Jessica really needs this right now." I could feel my jaw clenching as I looked at Jessica. She didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She just smiled, shifting her weight onto one hip. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I really appreciate it." I stared at her for a moment, my mind racing. My mom, my sister, they always put Jessica first. No matter how much I did, no matter how much I sacrificed, it was never enough. They always made it clear that Jessica needed more than I did. It didn't matter how much effort I put in. I wasn't the priority. I forced a smile, the tightness in my chest making it hard to breathe. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "Let's just get going." The drive to the airport was suffocatingly quiet. Jessica chattered away in the back seat, completely oblivious to how I was feeling. She went on about TikTok she had seen about Paris, wondering if there would be time for shopping or if the tours would take up the whole day. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white as I stared straight ahead, trying not to let my emotions show. At one point, my dad cleared his throat, his voice unusually soft. "Thanks for driving us, Sam. I know this probably feels unusual." "Unusual," I repeated, barely able to keep the sarcasm from creeping into my voice. "That's one way to put it." My dad didn't respond. He just shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly regretting his words. And Jessica, of course, leaned forward, her voice dripping with entitlement. "You're not mad, right? I mean, this is really big of you to let me go. I could never have afforded this on my own." I gritted my teeth and forced a smile. "Of course, Jess. Enjoy the trip." When we finally arrived at the airport, I helped them unload their luggage, my patience hanging by a thread. My mom gave me a quick hug. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This really means a lot to us, and to Jessica." I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." I forced another smile, though it felt like it was burning my face. I watched them disappear into the terminal, my chest tight with anger and hurt. This was supposed to be our trip. But it wasn't. It was their trip. The silence in the car felt suffocating as I drove back from the airport. I was alone, the hum of the engine the only sound in the otherwise quiet vehicle. I couldn't shake the feeling of being abandoned, of being cast aside. My chest was tight with emotion, but I didn't dare let it out. Not yet. When I had pulled into my mom's driveway earlier that morning, excited to finally get this trip underway, I never could have imagined this would be the outcome. Instead of a joyous send-off, I had been left standing there in a state of disbelief, watching my own sister get into the car, her suitcase in tow, while I was left behind like an afterthought. I had spent months planning this. Months of hard work, calculating every detail, saving every penny, checking every reservation. Every part of it was meant to be perfect. I had hoped this trip would bring us closer, that we'd have the chance to relax and bond as a family, away from the pressures of daily life. But now it felt like I had been erased from the equation, like I didn't matter. "Sam, honey, please don't make this difficult," my mom had said when I tried to argue. She had that calm, almost detached expression on her face that she always wore when she didn't want to deal with conflict. It was the same look she had given me when I was a child, trying to explain why I couldn't have something or why I had to do things the way she wanted. But this time it was different. This time I had given everything for them, and it felt like it wasn't enough. I didn't know what to say. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I wasn't ready to unleash it. Not in front of them. Not when I had spent so long trying to make them proud. But it was hard to ignore the overwhelming sense of betrayal. Jessica, who had done nothing to deserve this trip, was getting everything I had worked for. And my mom, as always, was blind to the unfairness of it all. She just wanted to keep the peace, to keep everyone happy, even if that meant sacrificing me. I had always been the one to make sacrifices. I had always been the one to pick up the pieces, to smooth over the tension. But now it felt like my entire existence had been reduced to that of the family's fixer. The one who made sure everything worked out, no matter the cost to myself. I kept my gaze straight ahead as I drove home, focusing on the road to distract myself from the wave of emotion threatening to drown me. The feeling of being invisible, of being unnoticed, was overwhelming. I had worked so hard, done everything right, and yet it never seemed to be enough. When I got back to the house, I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a few moments. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I closed my eyes, trying to calm the storm inside me. My mind raced as I replayed the conversation with my mom over and over in my head. Why didn't she see? Why didn't they understand? I had always believed that the more I did for them, the more they would appreciate me. But this felt like the breaking point. This wasn't just a slight. This was something deeper. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being pushed aside. And for what? So that Jessica could go on a trip she didn't deserve? The thought made my stomach turn. I had planned this trip with love and care, hoping to create memories that would bring us closer. But now it felt like I was nothing more than an afterthought. I got out of the car and went inside, moving mechanically through the motions of my evening. I didn't want to think about the trip. I didn't want to think about the betrayal. But I couldn't escape it. It gnawed at me, a constant reminder that no matter how much I gave, I would never be the priority. Later that night, as I sat at my desk, I opened my laptop and began to go through the itinerary for the trip again. I had already canceled the flights and the hotel reservations, but I needed to see it all to remind myself why I had done this. The confirmation emails flashed on the screen, each one a bitter reminder of the dream I had built, only to watch it fall apart. I didn't feel any better by going through the details. If anything, it only made the anger inside me burn hotter. They had taken everything from me. The trip, my effort, my sacrifice, and now they were going to enjoy it without me. I closed the laptop with a decisive snap, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was it. I was done trying to please them. I wasn't going to be their fixer anymore. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let them walk all over me. If they wanted the trip, they could have it, but it wasn't going to be the way I had planned it. The next few days passed in a blur. I tried to stay busy, working, cleaning, organizing my life in small ways, but all I could think about was the trip. My mom called me a few times, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk to her. Not yet. Not when I was still so angry, so hurt. And I couldn't bring myself to listen to Jessica's messages either. Every word they said would just feel like another reminder of how they had chosen her over me. But as the days went on, the anger started to shift. It was still there, simmering under the surface, but something else began to take root inside me. Freedom. For the first time in a long time, I felt free from the weight of my family's expectations, free from the need to be the one who always made everything work. I didn't have to fix this. I didn't have to save them. I could finally focus on myself, on what I wanted. That realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I didn't have to be the one who always put everyone else first. I could choose what was best for me, even if it meant disappointing them. By the time my phone buzzed with yet another call from my mom, I felt a strange sense of peace. It had only been a few days, but already, I felt a shift in myself. I was no longer the one who bent over backward to make everyone happy. And as much as it hurt, I knew this was the first step in taking back control of my life. I let the phone ring out. I didn't need to answer. Not yet. For the first time, I was putting myself first. And it felt liberating. The next few days felt like an endless loop. I kept to myself, trying to bury the pain I felt deep inside. But no matter how many distractions I found, work, cleaning, organizing, it never quite worked. The feeling of betrayal, of being ignored, lingered with me at all times, a constant reminder of what had happened. The call from my mom had come late that night. She had left a message, her voice sounding weary, but there was an edge to it that I couldn't quite ignore. "Sam, please pick up the phone. I know this is hard, but we really need to talk about the trip. Please call me back." But I didn't call back. Not yet. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to face them. Not when I still felt the sharp sting of being replaced. As I sat at my kitchen table the morning after their departure, I found myself lost in thought. I wondered what they were doing, if they had boarded the plane yet, if they were sipping mimosas at the airport lounge, or if they were already enjoying their first tour in Paris. It was supposed to be my trip. I had designed it for them, carefully crafting every detail. But now it wasn't mine anymore. I wasn't a part of their journey. I was the one left behind, as if I never mattered at all. The thought of them experiencing everything without me gnawed at me. I had given so much of myself, poured so much energy into planning this, only to be shut out when it was time to enjoy the reward. The worst part was that they didn't seem to realize how deeply it hurt. Especially Emily. I had barely heard from them the first 2 days. Not that I was expecting to hear anything, but it stung all the same. And then as the third day arrived, my phone rang again. It was Emily. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice dripping with that familiar, fake sweetness that I had grown so accustomed to. Hey Sam. I just wanted to check in and thank you again for letting me come. This trip is just amazing so far. We've done so many cool things, and I can't wait to tell you all about it when we get back. Thanks again for being so generous. My jaw tightened as I listened. Generous? Generous? I had planned this entire thing for us. Yet somehow Emily thought it was a favor I had done for her. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the room, but I just sat there, holding the device in my hand, feeling the weight of everything. I wasn't even a part of their we. Her voice kept echoing in my mind, mocking me. Thanks again for being so generous. The words stung even more than they should have. Emily had always been the one to get the praise, the attention. She was the one who never had to work for anything. And now, once again, she was the one enjoying the fruits of my labor, while I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered self-worth. That was the thing that hurt the most. No matter how much I gave, it was never enough. No matter how much I sacrificed for them, they always put Jessica first. She had no job, no career, no responsibilities. She didn't even care about the trip as much as I did. But she was the one who got to experience it. As the days went on, the weight of my realization became harder to ignore. I had spent my life trying to prove myself, trying to gain their approval, trying to show them that I was worth something. But it never worked. In their eyes, Jessica would always be the priority. No matter how many times I showed up, no matter how many sacrifices I made, it was never enough. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was broken. I started to think back on all the times when I had been overlooked, when I had been pushed aside in favor of Emily. All those moments where I had worked twice as hard and received none of the praise. Every family holiday, every birthday, every important event. It always seemed like Jessica was the one who mattered most. And I was always left in the shadows, silently doing my part, silently trying to make everyone happy. But it was never enough. And now, as I watched them enjoy the trip I had arranged, I realized just how deeply that truth cut. I found myself pacing around the house, the anger slowly rising again. I hadn't allowed myself to feel the full extent of it yet. I had been so focused on holding it together, on pretending everything was fine. But now the floodgates were opening. I felt a burning frustration building inside me, one that I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge before. I was tired of being the responsible one, the one who always took care of things, the one who was always there when everyone needed something. I was tired of being the one who always had to clean up their messes. I thought about what my mom had said to me when she told me that Emily was going instead of me. You're always working so hard. You'll have another chance. Another chance? How many chances had I given? How many times had I been passed over in favor of my sister, who could barely hold down a job? My mind raced, and the anger became a fire that was hard to contain. I looked at my phone again. There was another message from Jessica. This time it was a picture she had sent. A photo of her and my mom smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower, their faces glowing with excitement and joy. The caption read, "Wish you were here, Sam. Paris is amazing." The sting of that message was almost unbearable. Wish you were here. But they hadn't wanted me there. They had chosen Emily instead. And now they were acting as if they missed me, as if they cared. Felt like a slap in the face. I looked at the picture for a moment, my fingers hovering over the screen, tempted to respond. But what would I say? Thanks for reminding me that I don't matter? That's what it felt like. But I couldn't bring myself to reply. I wouldn't let them have the satisfaction of knowing that I was still thinking about them, still feeling the hurt they had caused. I put the phone down, taking a deep breath to calm myself. There was nothing left for me to say. They had made their choice. And as much as it hurt, I knew it was time for me to let go. It was time to stop trying to please them, to stop making sacrifices that they didn't even appreciate. I wasn't just the family fixer anymore. I was something more than that. And if they couldn't see that, if they couldn't appreciate all I had done for them, then it was time for me to start putting myself first. The moment I closed the door behind me after dropping my mom and Jessica off at the airport, I felt a wave of cold clarity wash over me. The anger, the frustration, all of it seemed to recede into the background for a moment. And in its place, something else emerged, something unexpected but liberating. Freedom. I stood in the empty hallway, the sound of the door clicking shut echoing through the quiet house. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was drowning in emotions. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was holding on to a role that no longer suited me. I had been so focused on keeping the peace, on making everything work for everyone else, that I had completely lost sight of what I needed. But now, as I stood there, I realized how much of myself I had given up over the years. The part of me that always made sacrifices, that always tried to smooth things over to make others happy, had finally hit a breaking point. I was done. I didn't want to be the fixer anymore. I didn't want to be the one who was always left picking up the pieces, always making the arrangements, always doing the emotional labor for everyone else. No one had ever asked me if I was okay with it. No one had ever asked me if it was fair. But that didn't matter anymore. I went into the living room and pulled my laptop out from the drawer, feeling a sudden rush of purpose. I opened up the booking website for the flights, hotels, and tours I had so carefully planned. One by one, I started canceling every reservation I had made. The flight bookings, the luxurious hotels, the guided tours, all of it. It wasn't just a matter of taking their trip away. It was about taking back control. Control of my time, control of my emotions, and control of my choices. I clicked through the cancellation process, each click taking me further away from the family I had always tried so hard to please. Each confirmation email that popped up on the screen felt like a weight being lifted from my shoulders. I could feel the tension in my neck and shoulders loosening, as though the burden of having to make everything perfect for them was finally being lifted. It felt like I was reclaiming something that had been taken from me for years. The cancellations were almost complete when my phone buzzed again. I looked down at the screen. Another message from Jessica. She must have sent it just after they boarded the flight. Sam, I just wanted to say again how grateful I am for you letting me come. We're on the plane now and I'm so excited. I'll make sure to take lots of photos for you, don't worry. I stared at the message for a moment, my fingers hovering over the screen. I felt a bitter laugh rise up in my throat. Take photos for me? How nice of her. She was enjoying this trip that I had made possible, and all she could think about was how to rub it in my face. It was as though she thought it was all just a small favor, a tiny act of kindness that she could barely appreciate. She had no idea how much I had sacrificed, how much I had poured into this trip, just for them to dismiss me when it was time to enjoy it. But I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision. This was the moment I had needed. The moment where I realized I wasn't going to be anyone's doormat anymore. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me because they assumed I'd always be there, quietly fixing everything for them. I had been silent for too long, and now it was time to speak with my actions. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long, slow breath. There was a strange sense of peace that came with making this decision. As much as I had loved the idea of giving my family this trip, as much as I had looked forward to their smiles and gratitude, I had come to terms with the fact that I was never going to get the recognition I deserved. I wasn't going to keep sacrificing myself for people who couldn't even see how much I had done. I felt free, like I could breathe again. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. I wasn't the one who had to hold everything together. I wasn't the one who had to make sure everyone was happy. And that was a relief beyond words. That night, I didn't pick up my phone when it rang again. I didn't even look at the messages that followed. I knew what they would say. They'd probably ask why I canceled everything. They'd probably call me dramatic, selfish, and unreasonable. But I didn't care anymore. For the first time, I was doing something for me. I turned off my phone and set it aside. The silence in the house felt oddly comforting. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. It was just me and the quiet. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was okay with that. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't tied to anyone else's expectations. I wasn't burdened by the need to please my family. The decision I had made the day before, to cancel the trip, to cut them off from the benefits I had worked so hard to provide, had freed me from the cycle of guilt and resentment I had been trapped in for years. I spent the day doing things that made me feel good. I went for a walk in the park, something I hadn't done in months. I grabbed a cup of coffee from a local cafe, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to rush through my day. I could simply be. Later that evening, I finally opened the messages that had piled up on my phone. The first one was from my mom. "Sam, please call me. We need to talk. This isn't like you." I didn't call her back. I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to explain myself to anyone. Not when I had just made the most important decision for myself in years. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for me. Not for my family. Not for anyone else. Just for me. And that in itself was enough. The freedom I felt in that moment was more satisfying than any trip, any accolade, or any approval I had ever sought. I was no longer defined by their expectations. I was defining myself. And that, in itself, was the most powerful feeling of all. The days that followed my decision felt strange, almost surreal. I had expected to feel a deep sense of guilt, to second-guess myself, but instead I felt a remarkable sense of peace. Freedom. It was the one word that seemed to describe everything I was feeling. The kind of freedom that comes from letting go of all the expectations, all the things I had carried for so long without realizing how much they weighed me down. It wasn't just the trip that I had canceled, it was everything. The years of quietly accepting my role as the family's caretaker. The one who made sure everything worked. The one who smoothed things over when they didn't. For the first time in my life, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't fixing things for everyone else. I wasn't bending over backward to make them happy. And I couldn't explain how incredibly light that made me feel. Every morning I woke up without the pressure of having to make sure my mom and Jessica were happy. I didn't have to check in on them, didn't have to make sure everything was perfect for them. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was drowning in the roles I had accepted, roles that I had never actually chosen for myself. And for the first time I realized how much of my own life I had sacrificed for them, only to be overlooked. I had often thought that being the one who made all the sacrifices meant I was doing something noble. But now I could see that I had been lying to myself. I had been living for them, not for me. And that somehow had convinced me that it was okay to be overlooked, to be taken for granted. But now that I had stepped away, I felt the shift. I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. There was no more constant pressure, no more trying to meet their expectations. No more trying to live up to a version of myself that wasn't even my own. I remember the first time I really allowed myself to breathe, to enjoy the space I had created for myself. I was sitting at a small cafe downtown, sipping a cappuccino and watching people pass by. There was a calm in the air, a stillness that I hadn't known in years. It was quiet, but it was a peaceful kind of quiet. I had never really allowed myself to experience this kind of solitude before, and now that I realized just how much I had been missing. I didn't have to rush through my day anymore. I didn't have to be the one who made everything happen. I didn't have to live up to anyone else's version of who I should be. I was finally living life on my terms, and it felt good. Over the next few days, I began to fill the void left by my family's absence in my life with things that brought me joy. I had always wanted to take a photography class, something I had put off for years because of the demands of work and family. But now, with all the time I had freed up, I signed up for a weekend workshop at a local studio. It felt so liberating to do something purely for myself, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. The class was small, with just a handful of people. I was nervous at first, meeting new people, trying something outside of my comfort zone. But the moment I picked up the camera, everything else faded away. I could feel the creativity flowing through me. The instructor was warm and encouraging, and I realized that not only had I been neglecting my passion for photography, but I had also been neglecting the part of me that needed creative expression to feel alive. After the class ended, I took my camera and wandered around the city, snapping photos of anything that caught my eye. The street art on brick walls, the sunlight filtering through the trees in the park, the faces of strangers passing by. It was exhilarating to be in the moment, to see the world through a different lens. I had spent so many years focusing on what everyone else needed, on what they wanted, that I had completely forgotten to pay attention to the things that brought me joy. I even started to take weekend trips by myself. I had never traveled alone before, not really. I had always felt the need to go with someone else, my mom, my friends, even Jessica. But this time, I booked a trip to a small coastal town about a few hours from home. I rented a little cabin by the beach, and I spent the weekend reading, writing, and exploring the small shops in the town. It was so different from the life I had known. Being on my own, doing things at my own pace, not having to worry about anyone else's expectations. The quiet of the cabin was a stark contrast to the noise I had been living with for so long. The waves crashing on the shore were the only sound, and I spent hours just sitting by the window, watching the sunset, feeling like I had finally found a space where I could truly be myself. I didn't have to be anyone else. I didn't have to make anyone happy but me. By the time I came back home, I had a new sense of clarity. I felt like I had reconnected with a part of myself that had been buried for years. I didn't need my family's approval to feel validated anymore. I had learned to validate myself. But the decision to disconnect wasn't easy. Even though I felt a sense of relief, there was a part of me that still longed for the connection, for the approval that had always eluded me. I knew I had made the right decision by standing up for myself, but there was still a pang of guilt whenever I thought about my mom, or even Jessica. I felt bad for not answering their calls, for not giving in when they asked me to fix everything again. But then I reminded myself, this was my life. I couldn't keep bending to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness for the sake of others who would never truly appreciate it. I had to live for me, even if it meant going against everything I had been taught. As the weeks went by, I found myself more at peace. The guilt began to fade, and the anger that had once consumed me started to dissipate. I still thought about my family, still missed the times when we were closer, but I knew that my journey wasn't about them anymore. It was about me and the woman I was learning to become. And for the first time in years, I was finally happy with who I was, no longer defined by their expectations but by my own. It had been a few weeks since I had made the decision to cancel the trip, and the sense of relief I had felt initially had only grown with time. The silence that filled my life was no longer oppressive. It was peaceful, comforting. I had settled into this new routine where my time was finally my own. No longer did I feel like a supporting character in someone else's story. I was the author of my own. But just when I thought I had finally come to terms with everything, when I had started to let go of the guilt and the hurt, the phone rang. I recognized the number immediately. It was Jessica. My stomach tightened, and I hesitated for a moment before picking up. For the past several weeks, I had ignored every message, every call from her. I had told myself that it was okay to cut ties for a while. It was okay to focus on myself. But now, as I sat there staring at the screen, I felt the old wounds start to reopen. I could already hear her voice in my head, sweet, saccharine, almost fake, the way it always had been. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. "Hey, Sam." Jessica's voice came through the phone, surprisingly soft and unsure. It was unlike her. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I wanted to call. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I blinked, not sure if I had heard her correctly. Jessica, apologizing. It wasn't like her to admit when she was wrong. For years, she had brushed things off with a laugh, with her usual charm, without ever truly acknowledging the pain she had caused. I wasn't sure what to say at first, but her words hung in the air, and for a brief moment I found myself frozen, unsure of how to respond. She continued, her tone sincere. "I realize now how much you've done for us, for me. How much you've sacrificed. I never saw it before. I was so wrapped up in my own stuff, and I didn't even think about how you felt." There was a long pause, and then she added softly, "I'm really sorry, Sam." I swallowed, the sting of her apology hitting me harder than I expected. I had spent years longing for this moment, for her to finally see how much I had given, how much I had been pushed aside for her. But now that it was here, I wasn't sure how to handle it. "I didn't think you would ever say that," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Jessica let out a small, nervous laugh. "Yeah, I know. I'm not great at this. But I really do mean it. And I want to make it up to you." My pulse quickened as I listened, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Was this really happening? Was this the same Jessica who had taken my place on the trip, who had always seemed oblivious to my feelings? Was this a genuine apology? Or just another attempt to get me back into her good graces? "I know this doesn't fix everything, but I was thinking." Her voice softened even more. "What if we went on a trip together? Just the two of us. No one else, no competition, no expectations. I know we've always been, well, in different places, but maybe this is a chance for us to just enjoy something together without all the mess. What do you think?" I was silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling over me. I wasn't sure what to think. She wanted to go on a trip with me now? After everything? After she had taken the trip that was mine and acted like it was no big deal? The idea of going on a trip with Jessica, just the two of us, seemed so foreign, so strange. I had spent so many years resenting her for the way she was treated like the golden child, while I was left to pick up the pieces. Could I really put that aside for a trip? Was I willing to give her a chance to make things right? I don't know, Jessica, I said slowly, trying to keep my emotions in check. I don't know if I can just forget everything. I don't know if I can just let go of all the hurt. I understand, she said quickly, her voice gentle. I really do. And I'm not asking you to forget. Maybe we can start fresh. Maybe we can create some new memories together. Ones that don't have all that baggage. I closed my eyes, trying to gather my thoughts. Could I really do this? Could I really go on a trip with her? The idea was tempting. It sounded nice to finally have a moment where we could put aside the competition, the comparisons, the constant tension that had always existed between us. It would be a chance to create a new version of our relationship, one that wasn't based on years of resentment. But even as I thought about it, something didn't sit right. The memories of all the times I had been pushed aside, of all the moments where I had been overlooked in favor of her, flooded back. I had always felt like I had to fight for her attention, for my place in our family. And now, after all this time, was I really supposed to just forgive her for everything with one simple gesture? I don't know if I'm ready for that, I said honestly, my voice shaking slightly. I think I need more time. This is a lot to process. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Jessica breathing, waiting for me to say more. Finally, she spoke. I understand. And I don't expect you to jump into this. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, Sam. I really am. And if you ever want to take that trip, whenever you're ready, I'll be here. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Okay, I'll think about it. As I hung up the phone, I sat there for a long while, the weight of her apology lingering in the air. Part of me wanted to forgive her, wanted to believe that she truly saw how much she had hurt me. But another part of me couldn't let go of the feeling that I was still being used. That somehow, even after all these years, she still didn't fully understand the depth of the hurt she had caused. I didn't know if I was ready to take that step, to give her another chance. I needed time. Time to figure out if I could trust her again. Time to figure out if I could truly let go of the past and embrace the possibility of something new with her. But for now, I had to focus on healing, on making sure I wasn't losing myself again in someone else's version of who I should be. The phone call had brought up so many conflicting emotions. A part of me wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation, but another part was still deeply hurt. For now, all I could do was take it one step at a time and let the healing continue on my terms. The days after my conversation with Jessica were filled with uncertainty. Her apology had triggered something inside me, something I hadn't fully realized until that moment. For so long, I had been the one to fix things for my family, to hold everything together while silently sacrificing my own needs and desires. It was as if I had been living for everyone else, trying to keep the peace, making sure that they were happy and fulfilled, while I lost touch with what made me happy. That realization hit me harder than I expected. I had spent my entire adult life playing the role of the family fixer. I had been the one who kept things running smoothly, who took on the burden of making everyone's lives easier. And yet, no one had ever really seen the toll it took on me. I had let myself become defined by the needs of others, not by my own. And now, as the dust began to settle from the aftermath of the trip, I knew I couldn't keep living like that. I didn't know how to change, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I began small, by doing things for myself that I had neglected for years. Little moments of freedom, moments that I had convinced myself didn't matter, started to become important. For the first time, I wasn't checking my phone every few minutes to see if I had missed a call from my mom or Jessica. For the first time, I wasn't apologizing for being too busy, too distant, or too focused on my own needs. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for taking time for myself. One of the first things I did was sign up for a weekend photography retreat. It wasn't something I had ever considered before, but I had always loved photography. There was a part of me that had always dreamed of capturing the world through a lens, but it was a dream I had put on the back burner for years. The workshop was far from where I lived, tucked away in the countryside. Felt like the perfect escape. I would have a chance to recharge and focus on something that was purely mine. No distractions, no expectations from anyone else. The first morning at the retreat, I woke up early, just before the sun, and went outside to capture the first light breaking over the hills. The cool air and the quiet of the early morning were unlike anything I had experienced in a long time. I had always been so focused on everything and everyone around me that I had forgotten how to just be in the moment. For the first time in ages, I felt truly present. There was no guilt, no pressure. It was just me, the camera, and the beauty of the world in front of me. Over the next 2 days, I immersed myself in photography, in learning new techniques, and in exploring the countryside with a group of like-minded individuals who shared the same passion. We wandered through fields of wildflowers, took photos of rustic barns, and explored small, charming towns. It was incredible to be surrounded by nature, by beauty, and by people who didn't expect anything from me but to be there, to simply enjoy the experience. I found myself reconnecting with a part of myself that I hadn't realized I'd lost. I hadn't just been missing out on photography, I had been missing out on life itself. I had spent so many years prioritizing the needs of others that I had neglected my own. I had forgotten how to enjoy the simple pleasures of being alone, of doing something for myself without feeling guilty or selfish. When I returned home from the retreat, I felt like a different person. I felt lighter, more focused, and more at peace with myself. I didn't need my family's approval to feel fulfilled anymore. For the first time, I felt like I was enough just as I was, without having to prove anything to anyone. I continued to make time for myself in the weeks that followed. I enrolled in a cooking class, something I had always wanted to try but had never made time for. I started taking long walks in the park, listening to music or just letting my thoughts wander. I even began to travel alone. I took a solo trip to a small coastal town just for a weekend. I spent the days exploring the beach, reading in cafes, and watching the sunset over the water. It was a liberating experience, being able to make all the decisions for myself, to go where I wanted when I wanted, without the weight of others' expectations. Each new experience, no matter how small, felt like a reclaiming of myself. I was rediscovering who I was, without the constant pressure of being the family caretaker, the peacemaker, or the one who always sacrificed her own happiness for others. I realized that for too long, I had let my sense of worth be defined by what others needed from me, and that I had forgotten that I too deserved to live a life that was fulfilling, joyful, and entirely my own. One evening after coming back from another solo trip, I sat down with a cup of tea and thought about how far I had come. The quietness of the house, the calmness I felt inside, was something I had never really allowed myself to experience before. I had spent so many years running on autopilot, doing what I thought I should do, what others expected of me, that I had completely lost touch with what I wanted. I felt proud of myself for finally stepping into my own life, for taking control of my happiness. The old guilt that used to weigh on me when I did something just for me had all but disappeared. And though the relationship with my family wasn't perfect, I knew that it was okay to set boundaries, to take care of myself first. I didn't have to keep fixing things for them. I could still love them, but I didn't need to lose myself in the process. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. I was no longer just the family fixer, the one who always had to make sure everything was okay. I was Samantha, and that was enough. A week after I had returned from my solo trip to the coast, feeling more grounded and at peace with myself than I had in years, I received an unexpected visitor. It was a quiet afternoon, and I had just finished some work when I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, I saw my dad standing there, his hand on the doorframe, a hesitant smile on his face. "Hey, Sam," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Can we talk for a minute?" I was surprised but gestured for him to come in. Over the past few weeks, I had been distant from my family, deliberately keeping some distance to focus on myself. I had been avoiding calls from both my mom and Jessica, but seeing my dad standing there alone, I couldn't bring myself to turn him away. "Sure," I said, leading him into the living room. He took a seat on the couch, and I settled across from him. For a moment, there was an awkward silence between us. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I could tell something was different. His usual confident demeanor was replaced with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe? Or was it regret? "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he began, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "And I owe you an apology too. I blinked, surprised by his words. You? I asked, my voice tentative. My dad had always been the kind of person who didn't show vulnerability easily. The idea of him apologizing seemed for a moment almost foreign. Yeah, he continued, his gaze drifting to the floor. I didn't realize how much you were carrying, Sam. I should have been more aware of how everything was affecting you. I've failed you in that sense. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I processed his words. I didn't know if I was ready to hear more, but I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair before looking at me. I'm sorry for the way things went down with the trip, he said. But there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago. I raised an eyebrow, my curiosity piqued. What do you mean? He looked at me, his expression troubled. I've known for a long time about the way Jessica's been treated differently from you. I've seen it all, Sam. The way she gets special treatment, the way she always seems to get away with everything while you always take on the responsibility. And I never said anything. I never stood up for you. I felt my heart tighten. I had known deep down that my dad wasn't as unaware as he had always seemed, but hearing him finally acknowledge it, hearing him admit that he had been complicit in the family dynamic, stung in ways I hadn't expected. You've always been the one to pick up the slack, he continued, his voice tinged with regret. And I've let it happen. I've let you take on that burden. I never wanted to make you feel like you weren't enough, but I did. And for that, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe him, wanted to accept his apology, but something inside me still felt a sharp, painful edge. For all his words, it didn't change the fact that he had let it go on for so long. He had known about the favoritism, yet he had never said a word. I don't understand, I finally said, my voice trembling. If you knew about all of this, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you say something to Mom? Why didn't you stop it? He looked down again, his face clouded with guilt. I didn't know how, he admitted softly. I always felt like I couldn't do anything. It was easier to just let it be, to let things play out as they always had. I thought maybe if I just kept quiet it would avoid more conflict. I never realized how much you were suffering. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what he was saying. I had always respected my father, but this was different. The realization that he had been aware of the way I had been treated, and yet had done nothing to change it, felt like a betrayal in itself. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. Actually, there's more, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. When your mom and I were planning the trip, I was the one who suggested that Emily go instead of you. I felt the air leave my lungs. What? I choked out, struggling to keep my composure. He nodded, his face pained. I knew you'd never back out of your responsibilities, Sam. You would never say no to taking care of everything, no matter how much it hurt you. I knew that. And I thought maybe if Emily went in your place she could have the experience, you know? You're always so focused on making sure everything works out for everyone else. And I thought it was time you learned to step back, to put yourself first. The shock of his words hit me like a physical blow. He had knowingly pushed me aside for Emily, thinking I would just go along with it because I always had. He hadn't thought about how much it would hurt me, how much it would feel like a rejection. He had believed that I would always just accept whatever happened, that I would continue to be the one who always sacrificed for the sake of peace. My mind was reeling and I had to force myself to breathe. So, you wanted me to just accept it? You wanted me to let her go instead of me? And you didn't think to ask me how I felt about it? He lowered his gaze again. I thought you'd understand eventually. I thought it would teach you something, Sam. I didn't want to burden you with the choice, because I knew you'd take on too much, as always. I shook my head, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. You never even gave me the chance to make my own decision. You never gave me a voice in any of it. The words stung. I had always tried to be the one who understood, the one who accepted everything for the sake of the family. But now I realized that my father, the person I had always looked up to, had been part of the reason why I had felt invisible for so long. I thought I was doing the right thing by letting you go, he whispered. But I see now how wrong I was. I sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything he had just said. The weight of it was heavy, too heavy. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to make him feel the hurt I had carried for so long. But instead I sat there quietly. I had already known the truth deep inside me, but hearing him admit it made it all the more painful. For the first time I realized that my family, my mother, my father, and even Jessica, had never truly seen me. They had never really understood what I had been carrying all these years. And that, more than anything, was what hurt the most. As I sat there, facing the truth about my family, I knew that the journey I had started, of healing, of standing up for myself, had only just begun. But now, I understood the depth of what I had been through, and the strength I had gained by finally confronting it. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I knew I was strong enough to face it. The trip had ended, and I had been bracing myself for the inevitable. The calls, the messages, the well-meaning attempts to reconnect. It all felt like an oncoming storm I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I had no idea how they would approach me after everything that had happened. Would they apologize? Would they just pretend like nothing had ever changed? Could they really understand the depth of what I had been through, the pain I had felt, the silence I had endured? The first message came the day after they returned. It was from my mom, her name flashing on my phone screen as I stared at it, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, curiosity. I had been prepared for this, but that didn't make it any easier. I took a deep breath and let the message sit there for a few moments before I opened it. Sam, please, I need to talk to you. I know things have been tough, but I want to make it right. I miss you. Call me when you can. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. I could already hear my mom's voice in my head, the soft, pleading tone that I had heard so many times when she wanted to fix things. But how could I just pick up the phone and pretend like everything was okay? How could I act like I didn't feel the sting of being ignored, of being replaced, of having my love and effort dismissed so easily? I put the phone down and decided to wait. I didn't want to rush into a conversation I wasn't ready for. I needed space, time to think. I had spent so many years accommodating their needs, always putting them first, always trying to fix the cracks in our relationships. But now I needed to put myself first. The next day, another message came, this time from Jessica. I had been expecting it. I knew she would reach out sooner or later, but I wasn't sure what to expect from her. Would she acknowledge the hurt she had caused? Would she try to explain herself again? Sam, I know things got messed up and I know I hurt you. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I want to make things right. I miss you and I want to be close again. Let's talk when you're ready. I didn't know what to feel when I read her words. Part of me was relieved that she had acknowledged the hurt. Part of me was angry that it had taken her so long to realize it. And yet, another part of me still wasn't sure if I was ready to trust her again, to let her back into my life with the same openness I had once had. The apology felt sincere, but there was a part of me that wondered if it was too little, too late. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. I knew that if I did, I would be opening the door to a conversation I wasn't emotionally prepared for. So I let the messages sit there unanswered for a few more days. But as the days passed, I began to feel a weight pressing on me. The silence, the unresolved tension. It was starting to take its toll. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just tired. Tired of carrying the burden of this family dynamic. Tired of being the one who always had to pick up the pieces. Tired of being the one who had to decide how everything would play out. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I didn't know if I could just go back to the way things were. I didn't know if I could forgive them completely. If I could open my heart to them again without feeling like I was betraying myself. After a few more days of reflection, I decided to respond to Jessica's message. I took a deep breath and typed out my reply. I'm still processing everything, Jessica. I need some time. I can't just jump back into things, not after everything that's happened. I need to figure out what I want. And right now I'm still figuring that out. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. It wasn't the perfect response, and it wasn't a promise of reconciliation. But it was honest. I couldn't pretend like I had all the answers. I couldn't pretend that I was ready to let them back into my life without fully understanding what that would mean for me. For the next few days, I received a few more calls from my mom, and a few more messages from Jessica. But I didn't rush to respond. I didn't feel the need to explain myself or justify my decisions. I had already given them so much of myself for so long, and now I needed to give myself the space to decide what I truly wanted. I found solace in the fact that I was finally making decisions for me. Not for anyone else. Not for my family, not for Jessica, and certainly not for my mom. I was making decisions based on what was best for my emotional well-being, and that was something I had never truly done before. It felt empowering. It felt like I was taking control of my life for the first time. Finally, after several weeks, I picked up the phone one last time. It was a call from my mom. I knew it was time to speak with her. But this time I wasn't afraid of what I might say. I wasn't afraid of the confrontation, of the hurt. I answered the phone, my voice calm but firm. Mom. Sam, she said, her voice filled with relief. I'm so glad you picked up. Mom, I interrupted. I've been thinking a lot about everything. And I need you to understand something. I've spent so much of my life trying to make everything work, trying to fix things for everyone else, and I can't keep doing that. I need you to understand that I can't keep sacrificing myself for this family. I can't keep being the one who fixes everything. I need to take care of me. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't respond immediately. I didn't know if she understood, or if she was ready to hear what I had to say, but it didn't matter. For once, I was saying what I needed to say, regardless of how it made her feel. I'm not saying I don't love you, Mom.
He continued.
But I have to find a balance. I can't keep losing myself in all of this. I need time to figure out what I want, what I need. I understand, she said softly. I just want you to know that we love you, Sam. I'm sorry for everything, and I'll support whatever you need. I exhaled deeply, the weight of those words sinking in. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't an instant fix. But it was a step forward. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself, and that was enough. I'll talk to you soon, Mom, I said, my voice steady. But for now, I just need some time. Take all the time you need, she replied. And with that, I hung up, feeling a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. It wasn't about forgiveness right away. It wasn't about fixing everything in one conversation. It was about giving myself permission to move forward, to rebuild on my terms. And that was the beginning of something new. After the conversation with my mom, I felt a profound shift inside me. For the first time, I wasn't just accepting the situation for the sake of peace. I was making decisions that were entirely for me. I had been so consumed with pleasing others, with maintaining the peace and repairing broken things, that I had forgotten how to nurture my own happiness. The realization that I had the power to prioritize myself was both liberating and daunting. In the days following that phone call, I started to think about what I truly wanted out of life. What did I need to feel fulfilled? What would allow me to finally embrace the life I had always dreamed of? It didn't take long for me to realize that one thing had always been on my mind: Italy. I had dreamed of visiting Italy for years. The thought of wandering through the cobbled streets of Rome, exploring the art and history of Florence, and indulging in authentic Italian cuisine had always captivated me. But for years I had pushed that dream aside, telling myself there would be time for it later, that I couldn't afford it or didn't have the time to go on a solo adventure. That was always the excuse. There was always something else to do, someone else to take care of. But now things were different. I had learned that my happiness mattered, and I didn't have to wait for the perfect moment to live my life. I was the one who had to create that moment. So I booked the trip. I found a small apartment in the heart of Rome, right near the Spanish Steps, and booked flights that fit my schedule. As I clicked confirm on the booking page, a wave of excitement washed over me. This was real. This was happening. I was going to Italy alone on my terms. The anticipation in the days leading up to the trip was electric. I packed lightly, making sure I had only the essentials, focusing on what I truly needed. The excitement of traveling alone, being the architect of my own experience, was intoxicating. For the first time, I was truly doing something for myself without feeling guilty about it. I was excited to experience the world on my own, to see it from my own perspective, and to revel in the freedom that came with it. The flight felt long, but I didn't mind. It gave me time to reflect, to think about how far I had come. The person who was sitting on that plane wasn't the same person who had always been afraid to stand up for herself, to speak her truth, or to put herself first. I was different now, stronger and more confident in who I was. I had learned to value my own needs, and that felt like a victory in itself. When I arrived in Rome, it was everything I had imagined and more. The city was alive, with people bustling through narrow streets, the aroma of freshly baked bread wafting through the air, and the sound of conversations in Italian filling the space around me. I spent my days wandering through the city, taking in the ancient ruins, the intricate art, and the bustling piazzas. I visited the Colosseum, the Vatican museums, and of course I made sure to indulge in every opportunity to try authentic Italian food, pasta, pizza, and of course gelato. But it wasn't just the sights and the food that made this trip so significant. It was the sense of self-discovery that came with it. As I walked through the streets of Rome, with nothing but the sound of my footsteps to keep me company, I realized how much I had been holding myself back. I had spent so much of my life defining myself by my family's needs, by my role as the caretaker, the fixer, the one who always did what was expected. But now, as I stood in a foreign city, miles away from home, I was learning to define myself on my own terms. For the first time in my life, I was fully present in the moment, not worried about anyone else's expectations or feelings. There was something incredibly freeing about not having to answer to anyone, about not having to fit into a role that was forced upon me. I could make decisions without fear of disappointing someone, without feeling like I was constantly bending for the sake of others. One evening, as I sat on a bench near the Trevi Fountain, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I thought about how much I had changed. The woman who had once felt invisible, the woman who had been content to silently give up her dreams for the sake of others, was gone. I had become someone new. I was learning to love myself again, to prioritize my own happiness, to see myself as worthy of the same care and attention that I had always given to others. That evening, as I tossed a coin into the Trevi Fountain, making a wish for good health, love, and happiness, I realized something. It wasn't just a wish. It was a promise to myself. I promised that I would never lose sight of who I was again, that I would continue to prioritize myself and my happiness above all else. The rest of my trip was filled with moments of quiet joy. Early morning walks through the cobblestone streets, afternoons spent in art galleries, and long dinners in small trattorias, where I savored every bite, every moment. I reveled in the freedom of doing what I wanted when I wanted. I made friends along the way, people who saw me not as a caretaker or a fixer, but as a person with dreams and passions of her own. When I returned home, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment, not because of the things I had seen or done, but because of the journey I had taken within myself. Italy had been more than a trip. It had been a journey of self-discovery, a step toward reclaiming my life, my autonomy, and my joy. I knew that from that point forward, my life would no longer be defined by the needs of others. I was no longer the family fixer, or the one who always sacrificed her own happiness. I was Samantha, and for the first time in my life that was enough. When I returned home from Italy, I felt a mixture of calm and clarity that I had never known before. The beauty of the places I had seen, the peace I had found within myself, it all felt like the perfect way to close a chapter and open another. I had stepped away from the weight of my family's expectations, and now I was returning as someone completely different, someone who had learned to embrace her own needs without guilt. The first evening back, I unpacked my suitcase slowly, letting the memories of my travels wash over me. As I settled in, I noticed my phone, which had been silent for the past few weeks, suddenly light up with notifications. There were a few missed calls and messages. At first, I felt a slight twinge of anxiety, but I knew that I had made the right decision to take some time for myself. I wasn't going to rush to respond to anyone, especially not when I was still processing everything that had happened. I opened the first message and it was from my mom. "Sam, please call me when you're home. I need to talk to you. We've made a mistake and I owe you an apology." The words hit me hard, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had been expecting this, the apologies, the attempts at reconciliation. But no matter how much I had prepared myself, it still stung. I had been waiting for this moment for so long. But now, as the message sat in front of me, I wasn't sure how I felt. Part of me was relieved that they were finally acknowledging their mistakes, but another part of me felt like it might be too little, too late. I let the message sit there for a while before I decided to call her back. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew that I needed to face this head-on. As I dialed, my heart raced, and my mind flashed through all the moments of frustration and disappointment I had carried for years. When my mom picked up, I could hear the emotion in her voice right away. "Sam," she said softly, "I'm so sorry. For everything. For not seeing what you were going through, for taking you for granted. You've always been the one to fix everything, and we didn't even realize how much we were relying on you. It wasn't fair, and I want to make it right." I listened quietly, unsure of how to respond. I had waited for this moment, but now that it was here, I didn't feel the relief I thought I would. It was as if the apology didn't change anything. I had already made my peace with the fact that I couldn't keep waiting for their acknowledgement of my sacrifices. I had already come to terms with the truth that I had given so much of myself and received so little in return. "I appreciate you saying that, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "But I've spent my whole life trying to be the one to fix things for everyone. I've always been the one to sacrifice, to put my own needs aside. And I can't keep doing that. Not anymore." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could tell that my words were sinking in. "I know," she said quietly. "I know we've been unfair to you. I just want you to know that I'm really sorry, Sam. You've always been so strong for all of us. But I understand now that you don't have to carry everything on your own." I took a deep breath, feeling a surge of emotions that I couldn't quite name. Part of me wanted to forgive her right then and there, to open the door back to the family I had once been a part of. But I held back. I knew that forgiveness wasn't something I could just give away anymore. It had to come from a place where I truly felt seen and valued, not just for what I could give, but for who I was. "I'm glad you see that now, Mom," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "But I need time. I've spent so long doing what was expected of me, and now I'm learning to do what's best for me. And that means not rushing to fix things with you or with Jessica. I need to figure out what I want from our relationship. And I can't do that if I'm constantly trying to make everyone else happy." We talked a little longer, but I knew the conversation wouldn't resolve everything. I had spent years trying to please everyone, trying to make things right, and I wasn't ready to just let that go with a single conversation. I needed more time. I needed space to make my own decisions, to decide how much of my energy I was willing to invest in relationships that had drained me for so long. When we hung up, I felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The apology wasn't enough to erase the years of being overlooked, but it was a start. Still, I knew that I couldn't let my family's attempts to make things right dictate my path forward. The next few days were filled with more messages from Jessica. She asked if we could talk, if she could see me. There was an undeniable part of me that wanted to rush back into her arms, to believe that everything could be fixed, that the dynamic could change. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't just fall back into the same old patterns. The apology was important, but it wasn't the solution to everything. I took a few days before responding. When I finally did, I was clear but kind. "Jessica, I'm still processing everything. I can't just jump back into things with you. I need to figure out what's best for me. And I can't do that if I'm constantly putting everyone else first." Her response was understanding, though I could feel her sadness through the words. I wasn't ready to rush into forgiveness, and I wasn't going to let her guilt or my desire for peace push me into a place where I wasn't emotionally prepared to go. I knew now that I had the power to decide. I could choose whether to continue investing in relationships that had long made me feel small, or whether to step back and build the kind of life I had always deserved. It wasn't about holding on to anger or resentment. It was about reclaiming my life, my happiness, and my sense of self. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to what others expected of me. I was making my own choices on my own terms, and that was the most empowering decision I had ever made. As the days turned into weeks, I began to realize just how much my life had shifted. The boundaries I had set with my family weren't just about giving myself space. They were about finally taking control of my own narrative. I no longer felt like I was stuck in the role I had played for so many years, the caretaker, the one who always fixed things, the one who sacrificed her own happiness for the sake of others. I had learned that it was okay to say no, it was okay to prioritize myself, and most importantly, it was okay to live my life on my terms. The phone calls from my family had tapered off. After my last conversation with Jessica, where I had made it clear that I needed more time, things felt quieter. The usual guilt that would have made me rush to answer their calls, to make amends before I was ready, didn't come. Instead, I felt something new: peace. The kind of peace that came from no longer being emotionally manipulated or guilt into compliance. I wasn't afraid of what they might say, or how they might try to guilt-trip me into re-engaging on their terms. I was no longer at their mercy. With each passing day, I found myself growing stronger in my resolve. I didn't need to explain my decisions to anyone anymore. I didn't need their approval to move forward. I had finally embraced the fact that I was worthy of love and respect, from others but most importantly from myself. I started embracing the new version of my life. I rediscovered old passions that I had buried under the weight of family obligations. Photography became more than just a hobby. It became a way of seeing the world differently. I wasn't just capturing images, I was capturing moments for myself. Moments that spoke to who I was and what I loved. I also began volunteering at a local animal shelter, something I had wanted to do for years but never had the time for. Helping others in a way that felt right for me without expectations or guilt became a source of great satisfaction. The most profound change was within me. I stopped looking for external validation. I realized that I didn't need anyone's approval to feel whole. I was enough just as I was. I learned to trust myself and my instincts, to make decisions that were rooted in self-respect, not fear of disappointing others. One evening, as I sat by my window with a cup of tea, I thought back to the woman I had been just a few months ago. I remembered the constant tension I had felt, the pressure of always trying to please everyone, the anxiety that came from trying to keep everyone happy while quietly losing myself. I didn't miss her, not one bit. Now, I was learning to live authentically. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were still times when I wondered if I was being too harsh, too distant. I thought about my family, about the possibility of repairing those relationships, but I no longer felt the compulsion to rush into forgiveness. I wasn't going to forgive just because it was expected of me or because it was easier to move on without facing the pain. I would forgive when I was ready, when it came from a place of true healing, not out of obligation. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was walking my own path. It wasn't always smooth. There were bumps along the way, moments when I questioned my decisions, times when I felt the pull to return to old patterns. But every step forward was a step toward a life I had always wanted, one where I could be free to be myself without fear or guilt. I was no longer bound by the expectations of others. I was free to live my life, authentically and fully. The woman I was becoming, strong, independent, and unapologetically herself, was someone I was proud of. And for the first time in my life, I could say with confidence that I was living the life I had always dreamed of.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.